Scene 2. Now, I know that some people have a different book, but still find wherever it is in your book. Okay? Okay, just letting you know that all these notes are on OneNote. You need to double click on this button and it will bring up, like, I've done it already. It brings up this page and then you have to click sync now and then you'll get, instead of the red frown face, you'll get a green tick. And then you'll have all of the up-to-date notes. But I don't think anything I've added since last time, so it's not going to make a difference. All right, cool? Good, good? Okay. Now. Okay. So has everyone got Act 1, Scene 2? There's a few things I want to point out here. I don't know if you've already made some notes, but there certainly is lots to consider in this scene. The first one that I really want to show you is here. If you've got the same version as me, oops, let's see if it, yeah, come on, all right, pencil tool. See here, Sergeant Carroll is talking to Frank and trying to find out where Frank was. Okay, where were you? Sergeant Carroll suspects Frank of buying alcohol for Jimmy. And he says, where were you, by yourself? No, there was about 10 other blokes. You all know that blokes is an Australian word for men? Yeah. White blokes. Frank says, what? Sergeant says, not abos or half-castes. Okay. Now, please make note that this, the calling an Aboriginal person an abo is a really derogative or pejorative way of referring to an Aboriginal person. So I'm going to come back here. I've written some notes in there that you might be able to read. Sergeant Carroll describes Aboriginal people as abos or half-castes, the use of pejorative or derogative language. Okay. Davis's use of pejorative language, derogative language, highlights the negative attitudes and racism demonstrated by many people at the time. Certain people, some people at the time. Okay? So Davis includes Sergeant Carroll referring to Aboriginal people as abos or half-castes to reflect this discriminatory attitude that was held at the time, and the fact that we used, people used derogative, pejorative language. Okay, so saying pejorative, derogative language, they're just good words that you can use in your essay referring to swear words. Okay, we wouldn't write in an essay he uses swear words because. We would say derogative language. Okay. And that is just a more sophisticated, grown-up way of referring to swear words. Yes? And then I've highlighted here, it's an offence to supply liquor to an Aboriginal native under the Aboriginal Act. Okay? Davis includes historical details. He includes this true history of things such as the Aboriginal Act, which is a law that really did exist, and you can do some research into the Aboriginal Act. There's also the Protection and Control Act. Okay, there's different acts that existed at the time. Davis uses these to give it a sense of realism. It feels like a true story. Okay. Also educating these about treatment at the time. We have a look. Note here that the Aboriginal Act is referred to by Sergeant Carroll. He says it's an offence to supply liquor to an Aboriginal native under the Aboriginal Act. And I've got a little note saying that by referring to the true history, it reinforces the sense of realism. Okay, questions? Does that make sense? Can I move on? Okay. Okay, I've got a little note here. We've got a contrast. We've got Sergeant Carroll and we've got Frank, two white men in this scene. Okay. And they actually kind of reflect two different attitudes towards, or two different white attitudes towards Aboriginal people. Okay. Sergeant Carroll reflects prejudices and preconceptions. He's got ideas and prejudice, racism towards Aboriginal people, which is demonstrated by not abos or half-castes. Frank has more of an attitude of understanding, tolerance, or empathy. Okay, so it's clear that Davis isn't painting every white man as the enemy. Okay, characters like Frank Brown are portrayed as sympathetic, tolerant, understanding. Okay, so Jack Davis is presenting different attitudes towards Aboriginal people through different characters. Does that make sense? Great. Okay. So, see, I think I've actually written that down the side there. If you can say, see here, Davis shows different attitudes in white community to Indigenous people. Okay. Now, we did speak about this last when we did the essay. But here is where we've got a lot of the information about the unemployment situation and the Great Depression. So Frank begins to refer to the hard economic times and the struggle. Frank talks about, I've been on the road already for 6 months, no work. Okay. So Frank refers to the unemployment problem by saying, I've been on the road already. 6 months, no work. Now, Sergeant has this quote, which is a really good one. Natives best left to keep to themselves.
To exclude the Aborigines.
Absolutely. It is revealing, depicting, reflecting the attitude of white community that wants to exclude and separate themselves from Aboriginal people. Now, I want you to take notice here because this is the beginning of the split scene. Remember, we split the scene between Northam and Perth, okay? And this scene is a split scene, okay? So we got half the stage, we got Northam, half the stage, we got Perth, okay? So this split scene, you can see where I've got this line here. That's the split, the beginning of the split scene, okay? So you've got Frank and Sergeant in Northam, and then you've got Mr. Neville, who begins talking. And now their language is different. Frank Brown talks in slang. You might notice back here, he says, I've been on the road already for 6 months. Yeah? That is actually not grammatically correct. What is correct? I have been on the road. Okay, so he speaks in a dialect. He doesn't speak standard English. He speaks slang. That probably demonstrates maybe a different level of education. So important, but what is that Dave uses different dialects of English to show between the world, which is the world that Frank Brown is living in, but particularly the Monday Millimura family are living in, okay? And this world of Mr. Neville. Now, Mr. Neville speaks very English. Imagine he speaks with a to show class, okay? He speaks formal, well-educated English. So there's a real contrast being shown here through the language, okay? But not only that, this contrast is highlighted through the split scene, okay? So, and I've written a little note here, and just at the top here, I've written the split scene. The effect of the split scene. If we have to analyse this, we emphasise the separation between the world of Mr. Neville. The world of Mr. Neville is where the decisions are made, the decision-making world, okay? And then the real life of the Indigenous people. And that real life of the Indigenous people is the effect of the decisions, okay? And so they're happening in the same stage, and the split scene highlights the separation between Mr. Neville's world. Mr. Neville's world is a world of bureaucracy. Is that a word that may be new to some of you? I think I have some description of it here. So this scene is a split scene. The effect of the split scene is to reinforce, emphasise the sense of separation between the world of Mr. Neville. The world of Mr. Neville is bureaucratic, official, white. It's clean. It's making the decisions. And the reality of the life of the Indigenous people, and the reality of that life is the effect of the decisions, is the impact of these decisions. Does that make sense? Cool? Okay. So Davis doesn't only use the split scene, he also uses the educated language of Mr. Neville in contrast with the slang spoken by characters like Frank Brown, but also the language of the Millimura Monday family has the Aboriginal words included in it, which highlights this separation. Cool? Now, this word bureaucratic. Bureaucratic is to do with paperwork, okay? So it's a world where lots of shuffling of papers and, office work, okay? Bureaucracy is about office decision-making and official kind of things, okay? And the reality of the life of the Indigenous people is very different. Okay, Miss Dunn also now talks about her brother who is looking for work and he's selling wirelesses, the radios. Okay. And Mr. Neville adds that unemployment's hit 30%. And so we've got, even in this split scene, the effect of the depression is in Frank Brown, but it's also in the educated world of Miss Dunn, and Mr. Neville refers to it. It's 30%. So I have 10 people looking for work. Sorry, 10 people out of 10 people, 3 of them don't have jobs. Okay. Now this one we also spoke about. Can you see, and you'll need to keep looking down, Mr. Neville then refers to the budget conditions. And we spoke about this when we looked at the essay that we read together. Because of the Depression, there are extreme budgetary constraints. It means that tight budget, spend a lot of, and he the week ration shillings and 4 pence, and this bears comparison with. Anyone remember what bear comparison with means? This is another way of saying, is similar to, compared to, okay? Sorry about that. Bears comparison means similar to. Not really right on the screen like that, but anyway. Okay, now, this is what the white unemployed get, which is 7 shillings per week. So the comparison there, Mr. Neville says that these are similar, when clearly the irony is that Jack Davis is showing that they're completely not similar. Less than. And they're making a budget cut and the way that they're making this budget cut is cutting rations. And we've talked about this: first soap, next meat, and then at the end, finally, it's sugar. I've got a few little quotes there. Again, remember, we're trying to learn 2 or 3 word quotes, nothing more. But they've got, a few ones there that you might consider. Can I keep going? Okay. All right. Alright, now I made a little note here, and this is connecting to that separation. So the key figures, these authority figures are the ones who make the decisions, but that's very separate from the actual real life of the Aboriginal people who are impacted by these decisions. So he's cutting off meat, cutting off soap, without even thinking or considering the impact that it has on the lives of the people at the end. Okay, it's a very cold decision, or it's portrayed as a very cold decision. Yeah? Make sense? And now the two worlds join as Mr. Neville has a phone conversation with Sergeant Carroll in Northam. And Sergeant Carroll is the local protector of the Aborigines, whereas Mr. Neville is the chief, the head protector of Aborigines. Okay, that's the title. Anyway, it seems that Mr. Neville has asked Sergeant Carroll to find a new location for the Aboriginal reserve. A reserve is like a place that Aboriginal people live. There are moments, remember the name of the place we live now. Starts with well, okay? So they're in the Government Well Reserve, okay? And they're looking for a new place for the reservation. And Neville, this patient, except because the people close, the adjoining landholders have got objections. Okay, so the people that live next door have got objections. Sergeant says, "Oh, I thought they might. What grounds?" And Mr. Smith says he wouldn't be able to go out and leave his wife home alone at night, and he's generally down at the hotel. Okay, he just wants to go to the pub, but he says, I won't be able to go out at night if the original was next door. Okay. So they look for a site for the new reserve, but nobody wants it near them. People are complaining.
And so Mr. Neville says you have to find an alternative site, and down here, notice that the council's concerned it's well away from any residences. That means it's a far, far distance from any houses. Okay? What I felt when I read this was I just remember here, anytime people want to put a rubbish dump or a prison, okay? If they want to build a new prison, nobody wants it near their house. Everybody complains and protests. And the rubbish tip, so where all the rubbish goes. Nobody wants it near them. Everybody complains, protests. Same thing, it's like this comparison that's implied is nobody Aboriginal near them. My own feeling I get when I read this. It's not, so whether that's suggested or just an effect on the audience, okay? We back to, comes the ration. She says, Sergeant, Sergeant, Sergeant. And Mr. Neville. This is actually kind of a line there. It's another split scene. Okay. So, of 80 who went out in the domestic service last year. Domestic service, working in a house. Okay? So domestic service, working in a house. Now, what does that mean? That means if you're being a maid, being a nanny, looking after children, washing, cleaning, cooking. Okay? So, 80, and this was from the Moore River Settlement, 80 went out as maids, cooking, cleaning, serving, and 30 returned in pregnant condition. Okay? So 80 women went out and 30 were pregnant. Okay? What is the implication there? What is the suggestion? What's happening to them? They're being abused. Okay? So it's suggesting at sexual abuse. It's suggesting rape. Okay? It's not being so obvious as to say it, but the suggestion, implication is these women are being raped. Okay? I wouldn't use rape, I would use sexual abuse. It's just a nicer way to write about it. Okay? $80 girls went into domestic service, 30 returned in pregnant conditions, suggests the sexual abuse that Aboriginal women encountered in domestic roles. And later on, we certainly have it more clearly, more directly expressed through Mr. Neil, exactly, yep. Okay, that one is obvious. That's not subtle. That's not a suggestion. That was really, directly explained. Just in case the audience misses this reference, it's directly expressed there. Now, I've got a few little notes here, so feel free to copy and paste as you like, or just rephrase into your own words. But with the budget cut, remember we talked about the fact that this budget cut, So these policies, they're not only not equal, but they deny the basic humanity of Aboriginal people. There's some phrases there you can use. Now, remember when we talked about the fact that the white unemployed was 7 shillings and the Aboriginal ration cost 2 shillings and 4 pence, and that bears comparison. Okay, Mr. Neville, by saying that these two are similar amounts, he is implying or suggesting that Aboriginal people somehow deserve less than white people do. Yeah? So this implies the view that Aboriginal citizens deserve less than white citizens. By having an amount so different but much less and saying that they're similar amounts, the implication is they deserve less. Okay? This really highlights the unequal treatment, the unfairness, the policy, the government policy that is unfair and unequal. I know, it's really hard work, isn't it? It's like, you've got to keep concentrating. Whoa, whoa. I don't know what's happened here. I don't know.
Control X.
Control X? Oh, you. Okay. Remember when we, in the speech, we referred to the jam and weevil seeds. Okay, more better than white man's flour. Okay. This interact here. Written notes on this. Remember, Gran is saying, I used to make this great flour when I was this high. I used to, gather the wattle seeds, and it would make a bag this big, and it was more better than white man's flour. Sergeant says, hey, you can do that if you want to do that. Gran says, fella cut down, so they can't have her traditional lifestyle. She cannot go and get the wattle seeds and make her traditional flour and bread because the white men have changed their natural environment, destroyed the trees, and what their food life. So only came on and taken over their land, stolen their land, but they've now changed the environment and taken away their traditional way of life, and they've forced them on race. So there's a lot of this, but the suggestion here, through interaction, this short conversation, that these Aboriginal people are being forced to rely on rations. Okay. Yeah. And Millie says, no soap, what am I going to wash with? And Sergeant says, well, you could go and buy some. With what? What money did they have? Okay. Sergeant says, you've got 3 men, lazy men, bludging off you. Okay, there's Joe, there's Sam, and Jimmy. But Millie says, where are they going to get work? Davis shows there's no jobs. Frank Brown doesn't have a job. Okay? And Millie says, cockies want them to work for nothing. Emphasising the unfair wages, okay, working for nothing. And here, Grant's saying they're not slaves. Millie's saying, last week my Joe cut 100 posts for old skinny Martin, and you know what he got? 100 posts for a fence, yeah? And he got a pair of second-hand boots. Okay, and we couldn't eat the boots. Can't do anything with them. All right. Can I keep going? We're nearly done. So we split back to Mr. Neville here. I know. Mr. Neville's ones are hard, and his speeches, and it's because he speaks such academic English too. Yeah? Of this letter, okay, he's writing a letter to Mr. Neil in the Moore River settlement. Okay, attention, Mr. Neil. Thank you for our hospitality. It's looking blah, blah. I was a little concerned to see so many dirty little noses. Okay. Now, this concern, I really need to emphasise, this concern is ironic. It's established. He is one whose policies and bring them into reserves. These government policies cause health problems and problems with the Aboriginal community. Now he's saying, I'm concerned to see so many little noses. Well, all right, he caused now he's concerned. So is Dave using this irony to draw the audience's attention to the fact that the concern is perhaps not genuine, or it's patronising. It's a word that I'm not sure I can. Patronising views, irony, not real concern. Okay, and basically there's a lot in there. There's some things that I've highlighted, but focus just on one or two things that you think I can use this in my essay. So I've got down the bottom here, I've just written his concern is ironic. Okay, and I would make a sentence something like, when Mr. Neville writes to Mr. Neil, he describes his concern over the children's dirty little noses. This clearly this is intended to be ironic, given that it is Mr. Neville's own policies that have created the problems in the first place. Does that make sense? Enough? All right. Your brain's dead? All right. Two things I want you to do. I want you to get out this document, and I want you to fill it in for me. And before you leave today, I want it handed in. If you don't have a copy yet, I've got some spares. I might have enough. I'll definitely do that one. Definitely do that one. What else?
Principle